Good morning. Welcome to Backchat. I'm Hugh Chiverton. Your co-host today is Andrew Work. Andrew, good morning to you.
Good morning, Hugh. Glad to be back after the summer.
It's good to talk to you. We're going to be talking first today about pro-independence messages on campuses. This week, banners and posters in support of independence for Hong Kong have repeatedly appeared on college campuses. At first, the Chinese university and now other institutions. Some of them are on so-called democracy walls, others not in spaces that usually allow banners. And there were more quarrels yesterday evening between local and mainland students at Chinese University, with groups arguing over putting up and taking down pro- and anti-independence posters. Should the university authorities take them down from around the campus? Should people have the right to take them down as others put them up? Are these messages breaking the law? And if so, which one? Why are these appearing again now? And what do you think the effects of these messages would be? Email us with your thoughts. Our address, backchat@rthk.hk. You can go to our Facebook page, Backchat on RTHK Radio 3, and comment there, or call us. 233-88266 is our telephone number. After 9:20, we're talking about digital radio and the World Service broadcast on RTHK. Joining us for our first discussion, we have with us Lawrence Ma, who's a barrister and chairman of the China-Australia Legal Foundation, Tommy Chung, who's a convener of the Policy Platform in Hong Kong, former president of the Student Union at the Chinese University, and we have Michael Davis, former professor of law at the University of Hong Kong. Lawrence Ma, maybe we'll start with you. Good morning. Hello, Mr. Ma. Hi, good morning. Yeah, thanks very much for joining us today. Is there a simple answer to the question of whether these are illegal or not? Because if there was a simple answer, then we could say, you know, that these should definitely be taken down. They should be taken down by the police or whoever, and the people who put them up arrested. But is it as straightforward as that?
No, it's not as straightforward as that, because there is, under the crimes ordinance, there is a seditious intention prosecution, where if somebody has incited hatred or incited dissatisfaction against the central government, then the person can be punished under that section. Now, that section has been utilized in the 50s to imprison pro-democracy or pro-China press editors. Some of them have been put in jail because of they've published articles which were very highly critical of the colonial government in the 50s. However, there is a problem with this provision because it is, somebody has called outdated. It is outdated in the sense that in those days, we don't have any constitutional protections of our freedom of expression. Nowadays, we have the basic law since 1997, and there is an article which expressly protects freedom of expression. Now, in light of these express provision protecting freedom of expression, whether this section on seditious intention for criminalizing people's publications and words and utterance to incite hatred against the government could still stand in these days against this constitutional protection. Now, there is no example in Hong Kong, but back in India, as you understand, India has also inherited the seditious intention provision as their counterpart in India. And India has also enacted a constitution which has a protection provision for freedom of expression. Now, in 1962, there was a case that reached the Indian Supreme Court, which ultimately the Supreme Court of India has to draw a balance between seditious publications and freedom of expression. The line that they've drawn is violence. So long as the expression of the speech doesn't involve invoking violence or inciting people to take on arms against the government, no matter how violent that language is, prosecution should fail because the balance is drawn upon the line of violence. Now, in light of that decision in 1962, I'm not sure if there is a prosecution by the Secretary of Justice now using Section 9. It probably reaches the Court of Final Appeal. How would the Court of Final Appeal interpret or draw the balance between freedom of expression and seditious intention? I don't know. But in light of this 1962 Indian decision, it would likely be those acts would not be criminal, would not be punished.
Okay. Well, one thing, I mean, you talk about it being outdated. If you look this up, online, then you're going to do a double take because it's all about the Queen, isn't it? If you read the legislation, it says it's all about Her Majesty's subjects and Her Majesty, her heirs or successor. Now, we have to replace where Her Majesty appears with the Hong Kong government or the government of the People's Republic of China, or what?
You have to replace the word Her Majesty with the central authority.
It's a central authority, not the Hong Kong government.
The Hong Kong government is already
is an organ of the
described in the section itself. But the question is whether because it says Her Majesty or against the government of Hong Kong. So if you have to prosecute someone who's advocating Hong Kong independence now, you have to change the word or turn the word Her Majesty into the Central People's Government. And the General Interpretation General Clauses Ordinance, Schedule A, has done that work for converting.
Okay, yeah. So what it amounts to is this law says that if you excite disaffection against the government in Beijing, that's breaking the law.
Or against the government of Hong Kong.
Or against the government of Hong Kong. Excite disaffection. That's, yeah.
What does this word disaffection mean? Yeah, I mean, this is not a word.
I have no idea what that means. What does it mean?
Well, judging from what the case law has said in the 50s, as long as you the event in the 1950s was this, there was this huge fire in Circuit May, I think, and there was this village has been burned down, a lot of victims, and the Canton government has sent a sympathetic visiting delegation here in order to visit those people those victims in Hong Kong. Their train was stopped at Kowloon because the colonial government was suspicious of their activities in Hong Kong, particularly in light of those days when there was the revolution in the mainland. So as a result, those people were blocked from entering Hong Kong, and there was a riot from supporters against the police. And the newspaper, which is, I think, is Tai Gong Pao, which is still a current newspaper in Hong Kong, the editor, the chief editor thereof, have published or recited an article in a China Daily, published the next day, criticizing the Hong Kong government, colonial. And as a result of that publication, he was put in jail. Now, that's how far exciting disaffection goes in those days.
Okay, interesting thing, interesting story. Okay,
but as you say, there was a break with the past, and that there were no other considerations against that in the form of a human rights protection, like Article 47?
Article 27.
27,
which is the
regarding freedom of speech.
Expression, I mean.
Yeah. So, I mean, how does that work? Does common law then, how does common law and precedent apply when you've had a break, as we had in 1997, where rights were established?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, that provision hasn't been utilized since the 50s. And in those days, it could still be, because this is still the law. I mean, as Ronnie Tong has correctly pointed out, this is still the law, which the constitutionality of this law has not been tested.
I see.
Yeah. Governments are always happy to throw out the old government, but they always want to keep the control parts of the legislation they leave behind.
Yeah.
Okay, Michael Davis, good morning to you. Hello, Michael.
Hello. Good morning.
Hi. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for joining us. What's your reckoning? I mean, just on the legal side of this, first of all, are these messages illegal? Are they seditious?
I agree with what I've just heard here. That generally, law on sedition or similar laws, and the U.S. has had some cases where the laws weren't precisely the common law or the traditional sedition statute, but something similar. And generally, there's a requirement when you have a free speech guarantee of some sort of incitement, and that there be imminent action, and it varies across common law jurisdictions whether violence or some other behavior is required, and so on. But I thought the summary we just heard was quite good.
How hard is it going to be to get some violence going here? I mean, we're starting to see clashes between students, and you've got 100 kids, 50 on each side. If this escalated to the point where they started having a go at each other, the authorities of late have seemed pretty one-sided.
Yeah, I've seen some of that on Twitter, and where students were very excitable and so on. I suppose if there's some kind of problems going on surrounding these posters and things that are being put up, that there may be some need to protect the speakers. That's one of the things also in this common law tradition, where somebody's saying something that's getting someone else upset through speech or however they express it. If there's some concern with public safety or public order, there's even a principle that you should protect the speaker from any violence or actions of this nature against them. Mm-hmm. So I didn't in the Twitter feed I saw about students at Chinese U there in the campus center. I saw no effort at no police or anything, saying the students were keeping each other apart themselves.
Okay, let's go to Tommy Chang now, former president of the Student Union at the Chinese University. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Hi, thanks for joining us once again. Why is this happening now? I think a lot of people were a little bit surprised to see this. We thought this had kind of flared up and then gone away again. Why do you think these posters have appeared again and you're getting this kind of response?
I think in the previous practice, the cultural plaza, which is ruled by the Students' Union, and the banner and the poster should be also ruled by the Student Union. And however, the Office of Student Affairs have decided to take off the banner without the agreement of the Student Union, so that there's a big conflict between the Student Union and the university office. So that I think this is the original reason of the.
Well, hang on. You're saying what's different is that they were taken down, but surely what's different is that they were put up in the first place. These haven't been messages like this haven't been posted on the campus, as far as I know. Correct me if I'm wrong. For years. So why have they appeared now?
I think it's the result of the localism in the university, because in those days I was the president of the Student Union. We didn't talk about anything about the independence of Hong Kong. However, the rising of the localism and which makes the Hong Kong students more support the idea of the independence of Hong Kong. So that I think this is the result of the political conflict in these years, especially in the past 5 years. After the umbrella movement, and they think fighting for democracy is not the only way to make the survival of Hong Kong, to protect the interests of Hong Kong. They would think more about the future of Hong Kong, whether Hong Kong should be an independent state. I of course, if you ask me, I do not support any ideas of this, but I think they have the freedom of expression on independence or not.
Tommy, are you still in touch with the student movement? Like, do you know if this particular student union board was elected with a mandate to get out there and push this line or fight the government, or did they just come up with this themselves after they got elected?
I think the Students' Union have been said that they put the banners on that. I think there's a group of students do that, but not the Student Union. But if I'm the Student Union, I have to support the rights of expression, because although the Student Union may not agree or may not have the same viewpoint on independence of Hong Kong, but you have to still protect the freedom of expression and also protect the rights of the students using the democratic board or using the rights to having banners on the cultural plaza, because it's the place where Student Union ruling, and also this is the only place that Students' Union have the authority to to have the banner putting on, and also have the different kinds of posters, including maybe some of the people disagree on the ideas of one country, two systems. They think Hong Kong should be ruling by China. So that if they have that viewpoints, it's okay for them to have the poster or have the articles on the democracy board.
You know, Tommy, you raise a good point. When I was the vice president external of the Student Society at McGill University, I traveled to Quebec City to protest a government decision and sat side by side with the Quebec separatists and said, I completely disagree with everything these people believe in, but I have to support their right to say it. I mean, as a student union leader, you have to take that position that you have to let the voices in your campus be heard.
What about the mechanics of the democracy wall, though? I mean, you're saying both sides can put up posters, but if one side puts a poster over another person's poster, what if one side, and this is what seems to have happened, one side, the pro-independence people, plastered the whole area with repeated images of the same poster? So what's the other side supposed to do? They can only put something on top of the other ones, and it sort of descends into farce a little bit, doesn't it?
I don't know the administration rules of the student union nowadays, but in the past days, we allow the student to put their poster or put their articles on top of the duplicated posters, like the time in these days.
Okay, so you could put on top of duplicated posters. So if there was more than one that was the same, you could put it on. That sounds fair enough.
We allow that. We allow that, but I don't know whether the
could you take down duplicated posters? So I mean, in this video, which of course many people have seen of a mainland student tearing off some of the notes from the posters, you can see that that's a duplicated. The poster that she tore off is there posted many times. If she takes it off a couple of times, it's still very visible. Is that fair enough? Are you saying then?
But the only organization or people could take off the duplicated poster is the member of the student union. So that it's not allowed to take off the poster by others or the students. However, I think it's more likely an administration problem instead of rights of freedom expression, because I think the student union have the responsibility to clear the democracy board in a time or in a period of time, because there may be some message which is outdated, or there's duplicated posters, or there's some poster or articles which violates the other rights, or is totally personal attached. We don't allow those messages on the democracy wall.
What is the chance of this spreading off campus? I mean, if we've got students that are having physical, not online, but real life confrontations on campus, what are the chances of this moving to other forums? I mean, Occupy Central started off as a campus protest that moved downtown. Could we end up with running battles between local and mainland students in the streets of Hong Kong?
I'm worrying that escalation of both sides will cause a more conflict in the university, because I think especially mainland students, they have their rights to express. Of course, I do agree that these mainland students should also raise out the concerns on the independence of Hong Kong, because they have the rights to express, because they are the students of the university, and also they have the rights to vote on the during the election of the students' union. So that they have to give response to that. And also, I think the students' union have to provide a platform for the students who support or are not supporting the ideas of independence of Hong Kong, because I think it's an opportunity. Of course, I think it's also a flash in the university that a more serious conflicts would be happen. But I think it's also an opportunity for the discussion of the independence of Hong Kong between the both sets of students, including the Hong Kong students and also the mainland students.
Michael Davis, I mean, do you see this as a kind of a microcosm of conflicts in Hong Kong as a whole, or do you think it's an exceptional case? Do you think what's going on at the Chinese university and the other universities to a greater or lesser extent is something different, is something separate?
I see it really as the first. I think it's we have a situation here in Hong Kong where I think, especially from 2014 with the Occupy movement and everything, there's very high expectations. There are promises that Hong Kong would have universal suffrage, and that wasn't allowed. I mean, the Basic Law was effectively interpreted to have meaning that no one would recognize as the meaning of universal suffrage. So there I think was a frustration out of that in effect the Basic Law was meaningless if China can assign any meaning it wants to it. But if it stopped there, that would be one thing. But in fact, since then, all the protesters are being rounded up, and very prominent ones put in jail, and are there now. I think what's happening on campus today also has some roots in that there's a sense that, if there's an independence idea, it's because functioning under the system may be viewed by many young people and young activists as futile. So, I think in a way the government has its fingerprints on this. They've sort of put a lot of pressure. They've appealed these sentences. They've expelled their opponents from the legislature. So I think in doing so, they've discredited the current system of government in Hong Kong. And you would hope that there would be some wisdom ensue and that people might examine ways to moderate this, but it seems that things are going in the opposite direction. It's sort of Newton's law that you put pressure down, you get a response. And I think the more pressure put on Hong Kong's young people and activists that are concerned about the future of Hong Kong, the more you're going to see a response. And I think these campus incidents are representative of that. We don't know who put up these posters, but certainly there are people in the community that feel an incentive to do this.
Well, can I ask, you were in the Article 23 concern group, weren't you? A long time ago, along with Ronnie Tong.
Yeah, with Ronnie and the whole Civic Party practically.
What do you think of Ronnie? What do you think of what Ronnie Tong's been saying about this?
I think Ronnie, when the Article 23 concern group went on, that was very much focused on legal issues. But as it ensued and went on to Article 45 and became a party, I think Ronnie must have seen that party as sort of in the middle between the Democrats and the government. And as time went on, with the party seemed to take a more strident position, and I think he felt uncomfortable with that. So we see him now in the government, and so it seems that he objects to the more extreme political factions in Hong Kong, and that's all I see in that. And he's expressing his views.
Do you think that the lack of there's kind of been a closing of a place to have a civilized debate about this issue? I hosted a debate on independence between Regine Ip and Eunice from the New People's Party against the localists, and there were 600 people there. But shortly thereafter, word went out that this was not to be discussed anywhere. We were lucky to sneak it in before that happened. And if there's no place for a civil discussion,
on campus actually to have a debate, to have discussions of these issues. To sort of sort things out. But, the environment is so bad right now.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Would the authorities allow it? Would they say, no way, you can't use facilities? The word has gone down from on high that this is not going to happen. And that leads to...
Yeah, it's hard to say. You could debate some things. For example, the issues around Article 23, which keep coming up, whether we should have stricter laws and so on. So there are sorts of issues of this nature that are, where's the boundary of free speech and what kinds of laws and protections should we have? And I think, you would get some strong views on it. Perhaps it's not about independence per se, but that would come up as part of the discussion. So there's sometimes ways to have these discussions that may be less volatile.
Like Lawrence Ma, it's not just universities. Would the China-Australia Legal Foundation host a debate on the legal aspects of independence?
Well, I think there isn't much of a debate in politics about independence because as we think that the fact of independence is simply impossible to achieve. But so there's no point holding a debate on it. But of course, if there's a debate on whether Section 9 is still constitutional in the legal sense, I think that would be more valuable to the society.
I mean, there is a debate in political terms in the sense that it seems that localists or pro-independence, and there are different shades, attracted about some 20% of the vote at the last election. So that's a significant political presence.
Well, I think a lot of localists
so that you can't really brush that off, can you, Lawrence Ma?
Yeah, well, you have to respect the reality that that people were disgruntled with with China and with the communist regime. But still, I mean, the law is the law. I mean, the question is, people have to be certain about whether they are breaking the law, and it would be more valuable for people to know that whether they're actually in breach of the law. I think under the current government, I don't think there would be prosecution under Section 9 as far as it goes. But this uncertainty remains, and it has to be resolved.
So, what, we need Article 23 legislation?
Well, no, at least we have to test the constitutionality of Section 9.
We're out of time. Okay, we've got a break now for the news. We'll be back in 3 minutes' time, continuing the debate then. Just before...
Hot, Hugh, hot.
Yeah, it is going to be hot, sunny periods and a few showers. Temperatures up to 32 degrees, 28 degrees at the moment, relative humidity 85%. Okay, back with the hot topic, independence posters at university. We're talking about Chinese university, but at other universities as well, the legality of these posters and how you handle, I guess, competing demands, and the question of independence as well. We have with us Michael Davis, former Professor of Law at the University of Hong Kong, Lawrence Ma, barrister, Chairman of the China-Australia Legal Foundation, and Tommy Cheung, who's the former President of the Student Union at the Chinese University, now convener of the Policy Platform Lab in Hong Kong. And our email address is backchat@rthk.hk. Our Facebook page is Backchat on RTHK Radio 3. Okay, here's some messages from the listeners. Henry, first of all, thank you, Henry. Another long message on Facebook. Henry says, this is the result of years of indoctrination by opposition forces that's led to the rise of pro-independence groups. In particular, university and secondary school students have been targeted by the opposition and by OC supporters. Academic freedom and people's tendency to be lenient towards students are used as a cover so they could infiltrate the education institutions. Do the students know that Hong Kong can never be independent? They obviously have the necessary intelligence to know it's not possible. These students have not taken lessons from the fate of imprisonment of student leaders of Lingnan University and Hong Kong U and Joshua Wong and so on. They do not realise that having a criminal record and imprisonment record really destroys their future. The record will torture them mentally for the whole of their life, feel shameful when ordinary people want to distance themselves from them. They could only follow the proverb, birds of a feather flock together, like Billy Fung, who was seen working with Tibet, Inner Mongolia, Taiwan pro-independence movement leaders. That these slogans appear now is tied to intake of freshmen. Their intention is to brainwash the freshmen, as later the students could be immersed in their study, making it hard to convert more people to the opposition. There is one obvious example in the orientation camps prior to OC. Talk about central political messages of the opposition, like rise up to challenge the establishment. OC were heavy on the agenda, and that was coordinated by the Federation of Students. One effect is mainland students do not like to go to universities in Hong Kong, as they have a high sense of patriotism from their past education. In fact, even some Hong Kong parents advise their kids not to apply to Hong Kong U law faculty, where Benny Tai continues to preach his belief for fear of their sons becoming a street fighter or being imprisoned. Newspapers reported that the CU student leader was dumbfounded when challenged by mainland students over who gave them the right to put up such pro-independence posters. The CU student leader's English and Putonghua was extremely poor, and the mainland student challenged him fluently in English and Putonghua. I think those student union leaders thought great about themselves, but do not know their language ability is so poor. What a shame. In the past, Chinese parents would say they studied diapers. meaning they learnt nothing but dirt and feces. That comes from Henry. TC on Facebook says, in this incident, I'm not that concerned as to the arguments for or against Hong Kong independence, but rather this is always the litmus test for whether someone really supports free speech. Except for defamation, do you respect someone's right to express something distasteful, unpopular, or in this case? I also find the idea expressed by some that citizens can't express something unconstitutional demonstrates what they know about constitutional law. The main functions of a constitution are to set out the framework of government and limit government powers. Some citizens of Hong Kong are only expressing an aspiration but haven't taken any concrete steps in achieving that goal. More importantly, I find Ronnie Tong's take on which laws are broken by the banners to be particularly comical. Ronnie Tong is citing a law that still refers to the British monarch. That comes from TC. As we heard earlier, you are, for the British monarch, you are to read the government, the Central People's Government, and so on. Michael Davis, perhaps we could just go back to you on that point of law. A lot of people will say these posters are illegal because they breach the basic law. And in fact, this is what the universities themselves seem to have been saying. You can't do this because it breaches the basic law. What does that, if anything, mean?
It doesn't mean much. At the end of the day, the Constitution, in this case, the Basic Law of Hong Kong, applies to the government. The government's given various guidelines on how to behave and how the system should work. But generally, these kinds of a constitutional document doesn't apply directly to private individuals' behavior. That's usually covered by ordinances and criminal statutes and so on. So it's not very meaningful to say that, I guess somebody's offending some requirements in the basic law, but they don't really apply to them. They're not charged with upholding the basic law. That's the government itself. And I think that the comments made, the long one that you read, it's sort of a conspiracy theory argument. And I teach students and have taught for years students in our university. I don't think they're quite that gullible. They're pretty, actually among the more intelligent, thoughtful people in Hong Kong. So I really think we need to step back and understand why people make extreme expressions, and I think they're really concerned about whether this one country, two systems model is working. Perhaps if independence isn't a good topic for debate, perhaps whether there's compliance with the one country, two systems model.
Well, yeah, you could see that, but they're not talking about that. They're talking about independence. I mean, Tommy Chung, that's
what I'm saying. They're expressing, in my view.
Yeah.
This kind of thing has been stirred up by the feeling of frustration. It's an expression. It's like Americans burning their flag. They're not really trying to burn their country. They're just expressing their outrage at what's going on. And I think there's a great deal of outrage in the community. 20% of the people who voted for these people were probably the most outraged, but a lot of outrage about how the one country, two systems is going, and more mainland interference in Hong Kong. The democracy was defined in ways that's unrecognizable and so on. So I think these young people see their future at risk, and they're expressing it. Quite frankly, I think if the basic law's promise of universal suffrage was carried out, most of this would go away.
And
it's not likely we're not likely to see that.
And Michael, as you say, they're testing the freedom of speech. I mean, how do you know if you have freedom of speech unless you test it? And you can only test it if you push the boundaries of the people that have the guns, right?
Right. You have to I think they're expressing their passions, and especially the young. The young are given to expressing passions, and I think sometimes us older people make too much of it, and then it becomes itself a problem.
Yeah, okay.
Now all this attention is drawn to this.
But Tommy Chung, I mean, as I say to my children sometimes, if you annoy people, they will get annoyed, and if you wind people up, they are going to react. Peter in an email says, "Are they really that naive? Basically, with their calls for independence, the students are begging for the accelerated introduction of Article 23." Tommy Chung, if they make these gestures and so on, they're going to get a reaction, and it's not going to be good.
I think it's also the concern of the majority of the society because they think the students should not talk about anything on independence of Hong Kong. However, but I think I agree with Professor Michael David that the students raise out the issue because the feelings of frustration because in the Occupy movement in 2014 and there's great failure which is caused the student think what is the other way other than
but if they want to be treated like adults, they've got to realise that there are consequences, and that if you can't just lash out in this way and say we want independence and not expect any consequences.
Do they actually do anything that's pushing the Hong Kong to go into independence? I think the majority of the young people think that it is not realistic to having the Hong Kong to be an independent state in the recent days or nowadays. They could not achieve this mission, but they have to. But they think they have the responsibility to express the views, because although they think that it's not realistic, but they think it's also a protest towards the government and especially the Chinese government. I think all of us should understand the concerns of the young generation because they also might not agree with the viewpoints of mine, but I think I do have to understand their feelings.
Like there's no campaign here. It's not like this, September we're going to have this message, and then October this message, and then November we're going to have a campaign to get memberships and try. We've got a target of 1,000 people signed up, and then we're going to do this and like there's no sense of a campaign. They're just, as you say, showing frustration, throwing some banners up. I mean, there is no plot, is there?
I don't think they have any further actions on this political mission. I don't think they have any plans on that because they just only think they have to express. I think the disqualification of the Legislative Council members and also they put the participants in the Mong Kok incidents in jail, and I think it would also stop the real actions in pushing the independence of Hong Kong. But I think they think it's not realistic to carry out any actions, but they have to still express. I think it's just only in expression, but if we want to solve the problem, we have to face the reality of the society and try to help the younger generations to maybe have to enjoy the rights of full elections, including nominating candidates, including voting, including participating in political elections. Because I think it's time for this government to find out the ways to communicate with the younger generation.
Okay, here's an email from Fergus. Thank you, Fergus, who says, with the subject line, independence. Sadly, it's self-deception to think that free speech will be a trump card for the students. The signalling from the SJ and the administration's new mouthpiece, Ronnie Tong, is crystal clear. People really need to wake up that the rule of law has gone in its wider common law true sense, and it's been replaced by its black sinister stepson, the rule by law, which the China and lately the Hong Kong SAR administration seems to use as if the two are interchangeable terms, which they are clearly not. So many examples lately this programme has also explored. Independence was never a runner here. It's only the birth child of some naive young people with a perversion of democracy here and frustration over the CE election. Also in this vein, consigned to the overflowing Hong Kong landfills must go to the mantra of Asia's world city. As in a world city, the cheap talk of independence would be tolerated. No more so here. Who is fooling who with the misuse of all these mantras? That comes from Fergus. Lawrence Marr, Just this week on Backchat, we've talked about the resentencing of those protesters. We've talked about the anthem law. Now we're talking about possible sedition charges. The example seems to be mounting up of the way that the administration, the government, is using the law to crack down on people of Hong Kong, to crack down on political protests in Hong Kong, and people are talking about a drift towards authoritarianism. Do you see that?
Well, it would be difficult to generalize that phenomenon into the administration is using the law to punish people or limit their rights. There is always an independent court here. I mean, when the Secretary of Justice was taking on appeal against the sentence of the occupying Central trio, there's no guarantee that the sentence would be increased. It is an uncertainty. There are legal principles that supports both arguments either way. So you cannot say that because of a success, quote unquote, in a heavier sentence would mean that there are punishments that is intended or orchestrated between the administration and the judiciary to achieve a result.
And even when it's kind of ridiculous, petty authoritarianism, the government has the unlimited power to prosecute people and chase them and file appeals, whereas, people's ability to defend against that is quite limited. Even if it's not going to win in court, it's still quite a huge amount of power to be able to harass people with legal, with legal issues.
Well, in a way, we have a very good system of legal aid. Legal aid has supported a lot of judicial review matters, and as well as criminal defense.
But I mean, between the anxiety and the time and having to show up and deal with lawyers and the worry, and I mean, it's in cases that are quite often laughable. We had people literally laughing in court yesterday over this case of the legislator that turned over some flags and whether or not he defaced the flags. I mean, it's a huge power, even when you're going to lose, to be able to harass people with the law. Lawrence, Michael,
Yeah, but I would be I'm surprised that they have a prima facie case found yesterday that inverting the flags is infringement of the national flags ordinance. But again, it is a prima facie case. When the matter goes to trial, I think the chances of winning it is not as strong.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're in civil law and I'm going to sue somebody, I better have a good case because I'm going to spend time and money on it. But the government has, unlimited power to chase people around even in losing cases and force them to deal with lawyers and pay lawyers and show up and, file for legal aid. I mean, it's a huge power. Yeah,
but the legislator himself would be aware of there's such a law that you cannot denigrate the national flag or the national emblem. If you choose to challenge that law and try to set a limit towards that criminal responsibility demarcation, then you have to face the consequences.
Yeah, but I mean, just sometimes people are just having a lark, and then all of a sudden, the government has the power to turn it into a farcical but time-consuming law case. Lawyers talk about it like, well, don't worry, the court. I mean, most people go their whole lives without ever dealing with lawyers in courts, and it's quite stressful for non-legal people to have that, hanging over their heads, even if it is a farcical prosecution.
Oh, well, still, I mean, it's their own doing that attracts the consequences.
One more comment from TC on our Facebook page. This is referring to the Vice-Chancellor of the Chinese University. TC says, Joseph Sung's response to this incident is quite disappointing as well. First, his personal views on Hong Kong independence should have no bearing on university policy or particular viewpoints expressed in the university. Second, his previous blog on being Chinese also demonstrated he has little knowledge in subjects like nationhood and patriotism. Stay away from controversial topics if you're unknowledgeable about it, says TC, and he has a link to a blog entry from Joseph Sung, which you're welcome to check out, or indeed join the conversation there on our Facebook page. Thank you very much indeed for your interesting emails this morning, and thank you very much to our guest, Lawrence Ma, there, barrister, chairman of the China-Australia Legal Foundation, to Tommy Chung, who's formerly president of the Student Union at the Chinese University, convened the Policy Platform Lab in Hong Kong, and former professor of law at the University of Hong Kong, Michael Davis. Thank you all very much indeed for joining us today.